everybody. As you can see, I am back in Athens, and I am still trying to get back on my feet here with classes and everything. Because of that, I really don't have a scripted review for you this week, but luckily tonight I did see a late night screening of Warhorse with a couple of my friends, so I'm going to give you my reaction of that, and by next week I should have another scripted review coming out for you, which actually I'm really looking forward to. Should be pretty good. But for right now, I'm going to give you my reaction of Warhorse, and you can take it or leave it. The way I'm going to do this is, I do know that some people get onto the internet and they look up reviews like this, mainly just to see if they actually want to see this movie or not, but they don't want spoilers. So I'm going to give a complete general overview of Warhorse without telling any spoilers. Then after that, I'm going to get more in depth. So people who don't want to be spoiled, they can watch that portion and leave, and then people who want a more in-depth version can stay and listen to my full reaction of it. General overview will be pretty short. Basically, it's a good movie. I really don't have a whole lot to complain about it. There's not a whole lot there. It's a pretty standard war story, except you just throw in a horse, of course. Just throwing a horse, you have your basic standard war story. There's not a whole lot of twists and turns. There's not a whole lot of innovation in it, but it does do it well. So it's a basic story, but it's told in a very good way. So there's no real fault in that. The scenery is superb. I love the scenery that the movie uses, and the acting is also superb. Out of everybody that I saw in Warhorse, I didn't see anyone who gave a less than above average performance. Everybody did a phenomenal job as far as the acting is concerned. The one problem that really the movie does suffer from, which is a small one, is the fact that it's just so standard in its story. Like I said, that's about it as far as the general overview is concerned. So now we're going to start to get into spoilers of the movie. So if you don't want to be spoiled, turn this video off. If you want a little bit more, then let's dig in a little bit deeper. Overall, like I said, it's a pretty standard story. It's basically this boy sees a horse being born, and then he follows this horse throughout his entire life. You know, and he always wants to be with it. Eventually, his dad, who was kind of a drunk, ends up buying the horse. And then the two of them go through a big part where they have to plow the field in order for them to pay rent for their house. After that, the war begins. The horse gets sold to the war, and then the rest of the story is basically the horse's story of where it went and how it ended up back in the kid's hands, and also the kid's story of how he eventually went to war too, his involvement in the Battle of the Somme, and how the two ended up coming back together. There's also a lot of parallels between him and the dad, because the dad went to war in Africa and came back, and so there's a lot of story in between the son and the dad, which is really good. Like I said, there's not a whole lot of twists and turns. One of the big areas, one of the first things that I noticed, which I really don't like the way that movies do this, is that the guy has a friend, this little red-headed guy, and in the first part, he's always joking with him, he's always giving the main character, Albert, a hard time, but, they're always smiling, they're always doing it good fun, and he looks lively and happy. I could tell from the second I saw this guy, he's gonna die. I knew he was gonna die. And it didn't help even more that whenever the horse first goes off to war, it meets up with this black horse, this black-colored horse, and the two apparently become friends. And the second that I saw the black horse, and I knew of the red-headed friend, I was like, okay, this is pretty simple. The black horse and the friend are going to die at the same time to kind of symbolize both the kid Albert and the horse having to suffer through this loss of their best friend. It was very predictable. I spotted it from a mile away. I think a lot of people spot it from a mile away because there's not really a whole lot that you can. You know what I mean? I wish that that they would have taken that and just did something different with it. It was so predictable. The horse lays down and dies. The friend gets it bad. They end up going into a not a foxhole, but a trench, while they're going over the top, and the best friend gets gassed and dies. And if anybody has taken a World War I class, you know that gas is pretty nasty shit. So the friend didn't actually get a nice, decent death. One thing I did like, though, and this is the whole point, is that there was another guy from Devon, which is where they're from in England, and originally, this guy's driving a car, he has this girl with him in the movie, and then the guy Albert shows up on the horse before they go to war, of course, shows up, and they have a race, and the girl gets mesmerized by the horse. This is, of course, back in the time whenever cars were a relatively new thing. And it's a competition between him and the guy in the car. And I originally thought that whenever I saw this, that this girl would be the love interest, and that they would fall in love, and then there would be a whole love story behind that would just kind of be forced in there. Luckily, that did not happen. I was very happy with that, because I didn't think this movie needed a love story. The story between the guy and the horse was enough. You didn't need to convolute it by this guy also having some red-headed woman that he also has to go home to. Also, what I really like is that the guy in the car goes to war with him, and he survives. And even though these two have a rivalry, you can still see that there's this rivalry between them. But after the Albert's best friend dies, this guy steps up, and really, they come together because it's a war, they're still on the same side, and it just goes to show that those little things that Hollywood tries to blow out of proportions, like the race, that could have blown up to this huge love story, really don't mean a whole lot in the grand scheme of things. Of course, this girl's not going to be his love interest. And of course, a little thing like that is not going to break up a complete friendship that those two could have, which it doesn't, because at the end, those two were there for each other, and that's what I really liked about that. Another thing I really liked was the portrayal of the Germans in this movie. Now, once again, remember, this is World War II, these aren't Nazis, so it's not as hard to make them more sympathetic characters, but it really went to show that, they went out of their way to show that the Germans were not bad people. That they really weren't these horrific people. There are two German brothers that come across the horses after a battle, and they're very sympathetic. They treat the horses right. Also, the person who treats the horses a little later on in the movie, who's also German, was a very sympathetic character. I really liked him. I thought he not only did a good acting, but it also, like I said, it went to show that not all people are bad, and that this guy was also under command of the bad German, because, you know, any war movie, you have to have, like, the bad guy, or at least the bad guy from the bad side, or the side that was not the Allies, or the Triple Entente. But the other guy was really good. You know, and they were very sympathetic, and one of the best parts is, once again, the horse ends up running away, and he gets caught in no man's land, caught in barbed wire, and a person from the English side comes out to save this horse, and then a person from the German side comes out to help him, and he brings bolt cutters, and there's a really funny scene where they need more bolt cutters, so they call for it, and like the German side, all of a sudden you just see a wave of like 10 bolt cutters go flying over this hill. And it was a really touching scene, and it was a really, I guess, a good commentary on what kind of the life was like in the trench warfare. Because they would even talk about, yeah, they're having like a conversation, they are glad to meet each other, but they know in like 30 minutes they're going to be bombarding each other again, and odds are this one guy might even kill this other guy. And that's just the way the war was. That's the way the First World War was. And I really liked that scene for that reason. Also liked it, of course, for the sympathetic German character, and I liked it for the commentary on the World War I perspective. What else? Oh yeah. One thing I find hilarious about this movie, well, not as much hilarious, but it's really something that I picked up on. The horse in this movie, who's named Joey by Albert, goes through, like, I think a whole bunch of owners for this entire thing. And this horse is bad luck. I mean, they pass it off at first as being the quote-unquote miracle horse. As being this horse that survives miraculous odds. But everybody who comes across this horse, it either has a tragic storyline to it, or they die. So either something really bad happens to them, or they die. So let's go through this. First off, the horse is picked up by this guy Albert and his family. And there's a big, like, whimsical scene where they end up plowing this field so this family can pay for the rent. The very next scene, there's a torrential downpour. The crops that they made are destroyed and can't be used, which is also the plot point that gets the horse into the war. And then the horse gets sold to this English captain, which, this is another part where the movie kind of threw me, because I thought that afterwards that this movie would be about the story between the horse and this new English captain that came in, who was really sympathetic to Albert and the character. He dies really quickly. He dies within 10 minutes of this movie. So there's one death, there's a turnip destruction. Then comes the two German boys who decide that they want to use the horses to help wheel out the wounded. Well, one boy the younger of the two ends up getting sent to the front, while the older one stays. The older one made a promise that he'd watch after his younger brother, so what he does is he charges off after him with the two horses, and he kidnaps his brother, so they both become deserters. The very next scene, they get caught, and they get executed. And I mean, they get executed. It was a pretty gruesome scene, actually. So, 3 dead, 1 bad crop. Alright, next group. It is found by a French girl and her old grandfather. That becomes a whole bunch of more whimsical scenes. It's kind of like a break in between the action. It's basically this girl learning how to ride, or she wants to ride, and she finds these beautiful horses. And then there's these great scenes between her and the grandfather. But eventually, the Germans find the horses, and they take them away from the grandfather and the granddaughter. And later on in the movie, the grandfather comes back to buy the horse after the war, and it turns out that the granddaughter died off screen. Which, once again, if we want to, there was a negative connotation, like, during this part of the movie, they do get raided by this German group coming in for the war effort, and there's this one German that makes the connotation that, you know, that this beautiful little, like, the girl had to have been like 16 at most, is upstairs, and like the grandfather defends her, and the guy doesn't do a thing to her. But once again, later on in the movie, whenever the grandfather pops back up and says that he lost the granddaughter to the war, that brings up a whole lot of negative connotations that you really don't want to think about, because the thoughts of what happened to this girl start to seep into your mind. It gets a little unnerving. But either way, another one dead, another one left without a granddaughter or a family for that matter. The next group is the German. Once again, okay, one person that didn't have anything bad happen was the German soldier who took care of him during this time, while they were being worked to death to serve the German cause. Well, he's okay, but then the black horse, that was the other horse's friend, it's dead. And then it finally comes back to Albert, and it's given to him by the grandfather who bought the horse and felt sympathetic to the kid. So yeah, it's a whole lot of bad luck for this horse. This horse isn't the miracle horse. This horse is the bringer of death and destruction. And I gotta find that kind of a little funny that every time that somebody comes in contact with this horse, something bad happens to them. So that's a part of the movie that really wasn't good, that really didn't get played out as much. Like, I don't think they really thought that one through, is what I'm trying to say here. I'm sorry, it's 3 in the morning, and I'm trying to stumble for my words. But I don't think the writers kind of thought about that whenever they wrote it, that this horse is actually bringing a lot more bad than it is good. But once again, I'm kind of nitpicking there. So overall thoughts of the movie. Like I said from the beginning, it's a good movie. It's a predictable movie, but once again, it is a feel-good movie because it has a happy ending, and it's something that kids could watch as well. The acting is superb. The sets are superb. The only problem that, of course, as I said earlier, is that the storyline is just pretty predictable. So, once again, I like to do my 1 to 5 ranking. 1 being complete shit, 5 being fantastic. I would give this a 3.5. It's good. It's good. And you should definitely go and see it. You won't be disappointed. And you could even watch it a couple more times. But if you're looking for something that's going to completely blow you away in every aspect, this movie's not going to do it. But that shouldn't stop you from seeing it. So, that is it for me and my reaction of Warhorse. Tune in next week. I will have a much better review coming out. So, until that time, I will see you later.